Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Tommy Kraft, and I am the co-creator of Electron Blade and main visual effects artist. And today I'm here to take you through another visual effects shot. Last week we did one from inside the Ambry, where the main storehouse is. This is the foyer area of the Ambry, and this is the shot that we're going to be going through. So let's start by taking a look at the virtual set. So the virtual set extends beyond the interior of the foyer and goes all the way outside, where we have kind of a city block here assembled, a basic city block that will be expanding later on. But for now, in terms of what we're seeing and then what we're working on, this will do. So down here at the front of the Ambry, we have our entranceway. We have the Eden symbol hanging. Very rough basic interior for the building, just to give some depth. And we even have a wonderful custom simulated water fountain here, which looks a little bit something like this when rendered, though even this is an older work in progress shot, and the area has progressed quite a bit from here. So moving on, we have our interior and exterior of the building here. And for those of you who are technophiles out there, we have 29 million polys, 29 million triangles, 84 million edges, and 38 million vertices. And in case you're wondering, the materials in this scene aren't anything terribly complex, though it may look crazy. This is from the era when I was really working on organization. These are all the objects that have their own specific texture maps and UV channels. They have self-illumination, IOR, normal, all that jazz. Most of the materials in the scene itself are all substance-based materials. What that means is they use the Substance plugin to essentially take a saved material that a designer has created with Substance Designer, a separate program, and let you use it in 3ds Max easily with a V-Ray renderer. So this particular substance here I got from textures.com. Great website, a lot of great materials and textures. And once you have it, you can just do Substance to V-Ray with the Substance plugin, and you're golden. And then the other things like the refractive and reflective materials and all that, not terribly crazy. Basic glass material that is using a window rain texture from Video Copilot, as well as this metal tile texture that I have. I made all the way back for Horizon. And what these are doing is affecting the glossiness and the reflectiveness of this material to make the windows essentially look a little bit smudgy and dirty. So here we are over here in After Effects, and we're going to take a look at the compositing of this shot and just what went through it to put it together. And this actually is a little bit of an older version of the shot, because I'm currently rendering a new version with an updated virtual set with some other stuff in it. So let's jump into our background here, our background pass, and we'll just take the base pass out of 3ds Max with nothing else. So after we have our base render here, I like to, as I showed in the last one, kind of build up our render passes a bit to add some more detail and to really bring out the detail. So starting from the bottom, we have our base pass out of Max, and this is just another copy of it that is unnecessary. We can turn it off. And we have the reflection layer, which, as you can see, just kind of brightens up the image as a whole, because our materials in this whole scene are all very reflective. Even this cement material is kind of reflected, because I wanted everything to have almost a moist feel to it due to the location of this structure. So one thing to note is our reflection pass. I'm actually running some neat video noise reduction on it. Whilst I have 3 render machines, these scenes and shots do still take a very long time to render. And you can see a lot of noise without the filter and with. That helps. It's not a perfect solution because you do still lose some detail, and that's also after a layer of noise reduction from V-Ray itself, where this was rendered from. So moving on up in our stack, we have the Refraction Pass, and the base difference between the two is that Refraction Pass shows anything that light passes through. So for instance, a water material would be highly refractive. A reflective is exactly what it sounds like. It shows you everything that light bounces off of. And moving on up our stack, we have our specular passes, and these are just kind of doubled up to add a little bit of bloom and glow and highlight. Jumping back on over into our shot, let's take a look at our source footage real quick. So here we have our source. There's a little bit of rotoscoping going on here to mask out the tape we had to use to put down on the floor to stick the green screens together and all that. But this shot is pretty simple. It's just the characters walking forward, and it's mostly locked off, but there was a little bit of movement, so I stabilized it first in this comp. And there is also some noise reduction that will go on this in the final render, because as you can see, there's some image grain in our footage that the Neat video helps take out quite nicely, and this just helps our composite work a little bit more nicely. So now that we have our background all put together, the render passes are put in, and everything looks good, it's time to drop in our people. Now, the composite here on this shot is actually pretty basic. Due to the type of shot, the camera movement, I didn't need to spend a lot of time on it because I wasn't going to be looking close up at any of these details on the people, and in fact, they're out of focus for part of the shot. So if we just drop down into our settings here, I'm almost embarrassed to show this, but the clip black and clip white, the matte is just crushed. But that said, it worked for this shot, and it won't always work. So there is also the camera lens blur on here, and I am having that set to an aspect ratio of 2.4 to try and create the squeezed bokeh from a real anamorphic lens. And if you might notice, this shot is created with a 16:9 aspect ratio, but then I drop it back over here into the main comp, which is a 2.39. We get that nice crop and just a tiny little anamorphic flare in there because it looks great. Before we're completely done with this, though, there's only a couple other things that we have to do. We need to work on our self-illumination. So one thing that helps really sell a scene is very subtle things like glows, for example. The fact that in reality, it may be bright enough to the point where it will glow around the edges of his head. So what we need to do is use our self-illumination passes from V-Ray and 3ds Max to work on adding those glows. So this is our base self-illumination pass. It is everything in the scene that illuminates itself, essentially. Now, the situation I found myself in was that I wanted to add glows to these self-illumination passes, but I also wanted them to be occluded by the people. So what I needed to do was drop the talent in with the composite, shut that layer off, and then use it as an inverted alpha matte for our self-illumination channel. Now you may notice a couple other layers up here. This is just from when I was experimenting. And one other thing to note is that because this is a 3D camera move, the layer of the people is inserted in 3D space, and that's why we have a 3D camera here in our self-illumination comp, as well as back here in our main comp. And if we just jump in real quick and take a top-down view, this is our camera, this is our layer of talent, just a 2D image, and you can see the camera moving through the scene and moving through that with our 3D rendered virtual set. So we're just going to go ahead and activate this layer, get a nice little bit of extra brightness here on these screens. I'm going to activate the next one, which has the star glow effect from Trapcode, and that is applied only to these green parts because I wanted some green little stretch flares coming off of here, and this is from Star Glow. It's a great filter. And then we have one more pass for just these guys down here because I wanted them to have a slightly different look. And you can see the very basic garbage mats I'm using to go ahead and grab these different areas. Now I could also render a matte out of 3ds Max for each one of these. It's really just a trade-off for you depending on the shot, depending on if it will take longer to render that matte out for the item than it will to just go ahead and mask it out. And I know some of you are thinking Object ID. Yes, that's great, not always the best option though. So then finally moving up here towards the shot, we have some final glows and a final star glow. This just gives it a very final little bit, and you can see over here what I was talking about earlier with the light that kind of shines around the edges. So let's just go ahead and shut all of these off for a minute, and that's our difference. it blends much more naturally. The idea being that anytime we can in a virtual set, we want to create blending. We want to have layers that go above and behind the talent. And so when we jump back over here into our final comp, we have just a slight little bit of camera wobble, a couple of basic lens flares to replicate the lighting in the scene. Nothing too intense. A vignette to kind of darken the corners a bit, like a real lens might. And then finally, we have some color correction. A base layer of color correction using the curves. Nothing too crazy. Chromatic aberration, which I might add, this color correction looks awful, but once you add the film convert on, it really brings it all together. And so then finally, this is the shot once more. Thank you for tuning in for this very quick overview of this visual effects shot from our independent sci-fi TV pilot, Electron Blade. Be sure to check back every Monday for video blogs with my co-creator, Callie Bussell, and every Thursdays for more visual effects breakdowns and more news on the progress of our pilot. Thanks for checking out this video, and stay tuned.